kid soap or whatever you kids spend your money on these days. And so he's living on what he can beg, borrow, or steal from his roommates. And we've all seen the convention zombies. They start showing up around Saturday morning. These are the ones who arrived at the convention on Wednesday, immediately began to party. Sometime around Friday at about 5 in the morning, they decided to go to bed. And at 5:10, they got up and proceeded to go back and party some more. And so now they are having the most miserable time of their lives, and so they're making everyone else around them miserable. We encourage you to have a wonderful time at AnthroCon, and that means exercising good judgment, which leads me to our last point. Public displays of affection. Now, I am not foolish, nor am I that old. I know that some of you folks are young and impetuous. This is your first FurryCon, and you've met your special someone, and you might want to go and have a good time. We encourage you to have a good time in accordance with our acceptable behavior policies. That means that there should be nothing happening in the public spaces that could not appear on broadcast television. That is broadcast, not cable. I'm sure we all remember a few years ago during the Super Bowl when Janet Jackson's wardrobe mysteriously malfunctioned. That wasn't very much, and that was enough to get them into trouble. The same rules apply here with AnthroCon. We don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home, or your own room, rather. This isn't your home, I hope. And as long as it does not involve hotel staff, comm security, or the police. Now, I'm sure you're all tired of hearing me ramble on, this old gray muzzle that I am, so go on, go forth, my lovelies, have a fantastic AnthroCon. Now, standing up on that platform, looking out at the crowd, I saw this disparate group of people. They were all drawn here for this love of what exactly? I didn't know what these people were drawn together by. I had thought it was sex. I watched CSI. There was an episode of CSI Las Vegas, this is important, called Fur and Loathing. But the furries in that show weren't acting like the furries I was seeing around me, and the costumes sure as hell didn't look as cute. I figured the best person to give me an answer was Kage, so I made my way through his vast entourage of people that were following him and asked him my questions like, what are you fans of exactly, and how do you come up with these characters? And he told me, well, come to my Q&A panel and I will explain everything. So I had nothing else to do, so I followed him to the next panel room. Now, I have had some questions already from new furries. I took exception to this. I wasn't a furry. I just was curious. About how you create a persona, your furry character. Well, I'll tell you, there are as many ways of doing that as there are people in this room or people on this earth. There's no one way. Here is how it happened to me. I had this old dumb terminal, which I used to use to log on to BBSs or mucks or other terms that you've probably never heard of, being so much younger than me. And one day I'm sitting at the terminal, and up the side and across the top crawled the greasiest, biggest black Asian cockroach you have ever seen in all your days. And I knew enough, I had never seen one, but I knew enough about them to know exactly what this was that I was seeing. And I was disgusted. I tried to shoo it away. Go, shoot, shoot! Any normal cockroach, you turn the lights on, they will scatter, they will run away. They are timid creatures. This one, not so much. It looked right back into my eyes, reared itself up onto its hind legs. I said, you're a ballsy little roach, aren't you? And my disgust was sort of replaced with this grudging admiration. And a light bulb went on in my head. I said, that's it. And I envisioned a little cockroach in black samurai armor with like 4 swords. And I introduced this character on Furry Muck, and it was a big hit. He was riding around on the shoulders of all the wolves and foxes and looking like a little Toshiro Mifune or something like that. Very stern. And I named him Kagamushi, which is, of course, a play on the Akira Kurosawa film title, Kagamusha. which is the shadow warrior. Now, mushi in Japanese is insect. So what he became was Kagamushi, was the shadow bug. For reasons of shorthanding and being quick for communication, it eventually was just shortened to Kage, which that was about 1991, and that has been me, more or less, after a fashion ever since. I still didn't understand what he hadn't answered my question. What are you fans of? I've seen My Little Pony and Disney's Robin Hood wandering around the same convention, but I don't understand. Well, young man, the short answer, and thank you again for volunteering, is that we are fans of the anthropomorphic aesthetic. We like to imagine how cool the world would be if it had these walking, talking animals in it. Some of us, we are all creators in this fandom. Some of us do it by art. That's a big thing. Some of us do it by writing, some by costumes, just really any sort of thing you can think of to apply it to. You can really see an example of the best our fandom has to offer over in our dealer's den. So, my quest for understanding continued. I made my way to the dealer's den, which was in one of these giant convention hall spaces with the concrete floors, the big giant vaulted ceilings, and the big skylights. And row after row of merchants selling furry-themed merchandise, t-shirts like this, or like with a big paw print on them, a rainbow paw print that says Furry Pride, or human-sized dog collars, and God help me, caffeinated soap. But there was one booth that caught my eye, and it caught my eye because it was different. Most of the booths I was seeing were visually oriented. This one was a bookseller, Sofa Wolf Press. Fortunately, there wasn't a line or a big crowd. Hi. I'm kind of new to all this. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Why animal people? Well, if you think back to the stories that we all grew up with, you think back to Aesop's fables, you'll always hear the story of the sneaky, crafty fox or the wolf that's the big bad wolf. Those are archetypes. Those are stories. So we just continue on in that sort of tradition. Fine, but it seems to me like there's all those old stories, but there's really not anything new unless you create it. So are you fans of your own stuff? Or, well, you're right that we do make a lot of our own stuff here in the fandom, and we're a very creative group, but you're wrong that stuff isn't out there. I mean, think back to what you grew up watching cartoon-wise as a kid. You watched Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, or Mickey Mouse, maybe. You watched, I don't know, Rescue Rangers. You watched Darkwing Duck, anything that Disney put out for a long period of time. All of that is anthropomorphic. It's all essentially what we would term furry in some way. I hadn't thought about that. The more I started to think about it, the more I started thinking about the cartoons and things that I had watched. I was a huge fan of Darkwing Duck. Hell, on Rescue Rangers, I think when I was 8 years old, I had a crush on Gadget. Does that make me a furry? Have I always been a furry? Am I a furry now, or will I be a furry? What does that mean? Do I have to buy this? Do I need to have a costume? What is it? I force myself to just calm down and breathe and talk to this gentleman a little more. Fortunately, he was very accommodating. Turned out he was the author of several of the books on the table. And so I picked his brain a little more, and I figured it would be polite to ask him what his books were about. So we talked about each of them, and I decided I should probably buy something. So I ended up picking up one about a gay tiger who plays professional football and his fox boyfriend. I figured, why not read the craziest thing I could find, right? All around the dealer's room, I kept seeing these people in costumes, fursuiters, they are called in the fandom. And some of them were so animated and they were really into it. They were really engaged, and it was so much fun to watch. And there were others that didn't really hold my attention, even though the costumes were gorgeous, because they weren't really in it so much as they looked like people in very uncomfortable outfits, just walking around looking rather bored, even though the expression on the faces was almost universally bright and smiling. And then there were the ones I really didn't understand. They weren't really fursuiting at all. They had their hand paws off and they were carrying their head under their arm. Now, in the convention literature, I had read something about something called a headless lounge, where the fursuiters can go and cool off and take their heads off, and I didn't really understand why they were walking around out here like that when it was apparently like across the hall. So I caught up with Rekka coming back out of a Dance Dance Revolution tournament and asked him, well, man, I'm not really a fursuiter. I don't know that much about it, other than, just seeing them. If you want to know about that, your best bet is to go down to the Headless Lounge and, I don't know, find Twitch or JD Puppy. They're probably the best fursuiters I know. So, I'm not ashamed to admit that the fursuiters were kind of intriguing. I can honestly see myself doing that. But I needed to understand the differences between those groups of people. So, I made my way down to the Headless Lounge to seek the Sage of Fursuiting or whatever. And I had to wait outside the door until the Cerberus that guarded the door to make sure that only the fursuiters got in was distracted by something. And then I had to sneak in behind the suitor. The place was big and cold. The temperature dropped by 10 or 15 degrees when I hit the door. Fortunately, there weren't that many people around.